This is our basic language model we are going to be using and building on from here moving forward throughout your entire program. And it's critically important. And you cannot go over this enough. This will take someone who doesn't know neurolinguistic programming and it will indoctrinate them into it. And I believe by the end of today, all of you will have had a real, no joke, belief change in your nervous system. So let's get going. So what is NLP? NLP it's short for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It was originally developed by Richard Bandler and John Grinder in the Santa Cruz Mountains in 1973, as I heard it, over a bottle of red wine. And at the time, Richard Bandler was a grad student and John Grinder was his professor. He was a linguistics professor. He was a very astute observer. And he was, at this time, teaching linguistics at University of Santa Cruz. Richard Bandler was his teaching assistant and a grad student there. He was also, at the time, working for a company called Metamorphosis Press. And they were putting together a book by a famous Gestalt therapist known as Fritz Perls. And to prepare for that book, what they would do is Fritz would work with a student up in front of the class for a couple hours, and they would videotape it. And then Fritz would talk for another couple hours about what he was doing with the student and break down his process. Well, during the making of that book, Fritz passed away and died. And Richard Bandler, who was concerned about losing his graduate, funding, went and said, hey, can I finish the book? I've got all this video, of all we have to do is watch the video, take notes, and finish the book. Would that be okay? And they said, yeah, go for it. Well, based on what he had already learned from John Grinder, Richard started to watch these videos of Fritz. And he was watching and noticing patterns of recurring behavior that Fritz Perls was using with the students that Fritz Perls never talked about when he would do the breakdown. Fritz was talking more conceptually about different things he was doing and different thoughts he had. But Richard was noticing certain patterns of language, certain patterns of thinking and handling the clients. And he took this to John and said, I see him doing patterns that he's not talking about. Do you see what I see? And John said, I sure do. And so the two of them got this idea. I wonder if we could watch these videos together and extract a recipe or a model, a step-by-step kind of, model of how to reproduce these seemingly magical results that this brilliant therapist, Fritz Perls, got. That then extended to a very famous family therapist by the name of Virginia Satir. And she was also famous for getting incredible results with people that other therapists couldn't get anywhere with. But Virginia would talk to them for an hour and all of a sudden things would change. And so this is why a lot of the early books on neurolinguistic programming are called like Structure of Magic 1 and 2, Magic Demystified. And you get all these magical names, and the books got absolutely, between neurolinguistic programming and Structure of Magic, you would often find NLP books in either computer science department of the bookstore or like the crafts and crystals section of the bookstore, and not in psychology, which is really kind of where they belonged. So, but their goal was to see if they could find a recipe or a model for this magic that these people did. Okay, so they studied Fritz Perls, Virginia Satir, and later on, Milton looked at the work that they had done with Fritz and Virginia. Milton Erickson was a very famous psychiatrist and medical hypnotherapist. And this is where we first see the connection between neurolinguistic programming and hypnotherapy together, which Richard became obsessed with. And you can hear a lot of that in his language. So I'm going to give you 3 ways to think about neurolinguistic programming that I think makes it really simple. The first way to think about neurolinguistic programming is a set of modeling tools that you can use to observe, model, or reproduce excellence in any field. So if you're a basketball player, you can use it to model the best basketball players and be better at it. If you're a poet, you can use it to model the best poets, that you consider best and be better at that. If you are a coach, you can model the best coaches and extract information and be better at that. And modeling gives you, when it's done properly, the ability to be far more economical in your efforts and in your communication, because you're not wasting your time spinning your wheels doing things that don't work. And I'll give you an example. One of the first modeling projects that was ever done with neurolinguistic programming kind of on a big scale was Richard Bandler, John Grinder, Wyatt Woods Small, a bunch of other heavyweights in NLP, and Tony Robbins, who was an assistant at this. They got hired by the US government to improve the sharpshooting program. At that time, it was about a 30-day program, but unfortunately, less than 20% of the people were passing at the end and proficient enough to allow them to go out into the field. So they said, give us your top 5 sharpshooters. And what they did was they modeled, using the tools and skills of neurolinguistic programming, these top 5 sharpshooters. They wanted to know what they did with their bodies, what they were thinking in their mind, what beliefs they had, how they were picturing things, what they were saying to themselves. And they took that program in short order and turned it into a 7-day program with more than an 80% pass rate. And they did that rather quickly. So one of the big skills, I know I've talked to at least one of you privately about this, is neurolinguistic programming will dramatically increase the speed with which you learn, for sure, because you're able to quickly assess the difference that makes the difference. So if you want to get if you say, hey, my specialty is going to be trauma, you'll get better at trauma much faster than you would if you didn't know NLP. Even if you're learning a different process like EMDR, which is actually NLP based. So we can get into that later on. But for those of you who are interested in EMDR, Francine Shapiro developed that based off of what she learned in NLP from Robert Dilts with eye accessing cues. That came from NLP. And the new kind of hot trauma process is what's called the reconsolidation of traumatic memories, which is a little bit more scripted and advanced version of the fast phobia trauma that you're going to be learning. You're going to learn everything you need to do it extremely well with me. But that is the one that they're now pushing to a lot of therapists because it's scripted. They don't need to know any NLP to do it. And it works like gangbusters. And we have a tremendous amount of data and science to back that up. Okay. The second way to think about neurolinguistic programming is a set of processes. There's all these amazing processes that have been archived as a result of this modeling that's been going on since day one. And in the future, when you are certified NLP practitioners and you're out there working in your field of interest and you develop new material, you will now probably create your own NLP processes. So we have processes like the visual swish. And this is good for a shocking image. So I had a client many years ago who got in a car accident. She was in the passenger seat, and a person, unfortunately, expired and landed on her windshield. And she had this image locked into her mind, and it prevented her from being able to get into the passenger seat of a car ever since then. So wherever she went, she'd have to drive, and it caused all these other phobias and related traumas. So a process like the visual swish is excellent for removing any shocking image from your mind. We have another one for an auditory invasive thought. We have the trauma process. We have a similar one that we use for phobias. If you have any kind of phobias of like spiders and, fear of heights and things like that, we have processes for that. Did you know that we also have NLP processes for things like allergies? An allergy is considered like a phobia of the immune system. So we'll probably dig into that at some point and tell you a little bit more about that. But I've done a lot of work with every kind of allergy you can imagine, food allergies, cat and dog allergies, seasonal allergies, undefined allergies. We've even done some work with asthma and other things like that. Any part of what's called your autonomic nervous system all of that is influenced by your unconscious mind. Anxiety, stress, pressure, things like that. All of these things are heavily influenced by what's called your autonomic nervous system. And if it's affected by that, then NLP can probably do some good for you in that particular area. There's a lot of processes. There's also processes for those of you who are maybe more business focused. There's some really good NLP processes that you will learn during your practitioner on how to resolve conflicts, whether it's an internal conflict with you or whether it's an external conflict between you and another person. So we do cover mediation, we do cover negotiation, and we do cover how to resolve conflicts as well. There's another process that you will learn called the 6-step reframe. That's an amazing process to help take care of unconscious objections that are kind of out of your conscious reach. So if you have some behavior that you keep doing over and over again, like biting your nails or smoking cigarettes, and you consciously you go, gosh, I really don't like this, I want to stop. Or overeating, I really want to stop, but I just can't get myself to do it. There's something blocking me. A process like the 6-step reframe can really help you with that quite a bit. And there's a lot of other processes you're going to learn. Another one is change personal history, where you can take a recurring feeling that comes up in your body and take that you back into the past and find out what caused that and then shift it. So if every time you get up in front of a room to speak, you start to get like nervousness or what have you, that's something we might use change personal history for. I've got a video, I think, on YouTube of me doing that with a woman who was terrified of the water, absolutely terrified of the water, and she couldn't put her head underneath water. She had difficulty washing her own hair because she didn't want to submerge her head underneath the shower head. That video, you could search it up and check it out. You'll see that we were able to resolve that pretty quickly. All right. Now, the third way to think about NLP is an ongoing field of study, where we're studying the structure of that seemingly subjective experience, right? And so just to clarify the difference between objective and subjective experience, objective is, if we're talking about my sweater here, it's a black sweater, right? We can all agree I'm wearing a black sweater. That is objective, okay? Now, if I say it's a great sweater, doesn't it look great on me? That's subjective. That's a matter of opinion. And some people may have the opinion it is, and some people may have the opinion it's not. In college, one of my kind of focuses was creative writing, and it was painful because it was so subjective. I'd write a chapter of a book that I was working on, and one person would love it and the other person would hate it, and it was quite torturous. Whereas with math, a lot of times it's quite objective. So NLP helps us to really study that seemingly kind of subjective experience that people have. And I like to think of it as what we call thought pattern identification. Over the course of the next 15 weeks, one of the things we're going to do is teach you to notice recurring patterns of thinking, behaving, and responding to other people. And some of those will be really useful, and you'll probably leave them alone. And some of those you'll find out, oh, that's the reason why X keeps happening, and it really annoys me. And so you'll change it. But you can't have a choice in the matter if you're not even aware that you're doing it. There's an old saying, fish don't know they're wet. And that was told to me by a guy named Tom Hubiar, who started the NLP Cafe many, many years ago. I added a little extra line to that. I said, well, Tom, that's until you pull them out of water. Then they quickly know that they're wet and they want back in the water, right? And so a lot of times we're not aware of an unuseful pattern of thinking, behaving, or responding until it stops working and it starts causing us unnecessary suffering. And so your ability to notice these recurring patterns of thinking and acting and responding in yourself and others is going to go up infinitely during the course of this program. Now, what is it good for? Why should you learn this stuff? Well, NLP will help you manage your internal mental and emotional state, right? So basically, you have a lot more choice in your ability to feel the way that you want. Now, this does not mean that I encourage you to never have a bad day and to never feel any kind of pain or discomfort. Sometimes it's incredibly useful and healing to allow yourself to feel the pain or the reality of a situation. So this is not about avoiding having a bad day. Some people who learn NLP and get excited about it in the beginning feel that no one should ever feel bad or no one should ever have a tough day or a tough moment. I don't necessarily agree with that, but NLP will give you choice in how you feel in those times. It will also help you stay resourceful during stressful times, which means you can stay calm and manage. A lot of us, do fairly well. And then when suddenly we get hit with intense stress and pressure, we freak out or we become reactive and our old childhood programming gets fired off. And so you can put it in the chat. I'm curious how many of you have noticed that sometimes when you get stressed enough or really caught off guard, suddenly those old reactions that maybe your parents did growing up or that you learned in your family system that you've tried to suppress so hard come right back up, and here they are again. And you go, what triggered that? Well, it's because you got stressful enough, you became unresourceful, and up comes the old patterns. So our goal is to help you have a lot more choice in these moments. And that will also give you a higher degree of behavioral flexibility in difficult situations. So when you're very relaxed and calm, notice your bandwidth is huge in comparison, right? You have a lot of choice. You have a lot of ability. Imagine if you just won the lottery. So you've just become $10 million richer this morning. $10 million, or for those of you international, 10 million euro richer, right? And all of a sudden you've got that. Do you think you're going to be less stressed if you get a parking ticket, right? Or an extra unexpected bill in the mail? Probably so, because you feel more resourceful to handle that. Well, now imagine that across the board, okay? Because a lot of times life will catch us off guard, and these are often what we call the defining moments. So the goal is to give you a lot more choice in that. I already mentioned it will dramatically increase the speed with which you learn. This is what brought me to neurolinguistic programming. I was English major, philosophy minor with interest in psychology when I first went to college, and I was super ADD, and I had big issues with reading. So I would read a book, I would get to the bottom of a page, particularly on a technical book, and I literally couldn't remember what I read. And it was torture. And so in desperation, I went to the local bookstore to try and find some study aid books to help me out. And I ended up discovering Awaken the Giant Within by Anthony Robbins. Hats off to him. And that book was my introduction into neurolinguistic programming. I went through that book, I looked at the bibliography, and then I started studying Richard and John and Tim and Susie and Robert Dilts and all those guys. So NLP will also help you become a much more influential member of any group that you're a part of. There's a law called the law of requisite variety, which says the most flexible element in the system will control the system. So the more that you can manage your own state, the more resourceful that you can stay, and the more behavioral flexibility you have, the more influential you're going to be, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in your own personal relationships. And this is not about, a lot of people sometimes who don't know much about NLP, or they've maybe got introduced from the wrong angle, will say, see it as manipulative. Like, oh, does this mean I'm going to be more manipulative? I can get people to do what I want. Well, yeah, it does. But if you love somebody right now, not having these skills makes it harder for you to love them. That's the truth. Because our normal default is when we care about someone and we're trying to do something good for them, we'll do what we believe would be good for us. That's like kind of our normal default. Most of the time, we assume that we all love in the same way. So if I want to be more loving to you, I'll do what would work for me and apply that to you and hope for the best. But one of the things you're going to learn is we are not wired the same. We do not all have the same map. And so, yes, you're more manipulative, but manipulation means to simply move with precision and skill. It means you're more precise and you're more skillful in the actions that you take. And if you apply that in an ethical, thoughtful way to other people, you can do a lot more good. You can help heal a lot more unnecessary suffering. You can be a better mate to your partner, or a better parent to your children, or a better sibling to your brother or sister, or a better teacher to your students, or a better contributor to your company. And you'll better understand what's really driving other people and how to help them or work with them or understand what's getting them stuck. And I think you'll also be a lot kinder to yourself as well. So a big shift in this program is getting out of judgment and into curiosity. Okay. And then the last thing it's really good for is modeling excellence and pathology. I spent a lot of time, because I originally started in mental health. I worked in mental health for 10 years as a case manager. I worked with a lot of mentally disabled, developmentally disabled, and drug addicted people, helping to model out what was causing them to get anxious and stressed and angry and explosive and blow up. There was a violent population I worked with for a couple of years. And I remember going to work that first day, and I thought I was going to be at a talking job where I was going to talk to people and help them feel better about themselves. And imagine this, day one on the job, they give me a mouthpiece and tell me to get it fitted. Then they tell me to take off my tie and roll up my sleeves so the clients wouldn't have something to grab onto. And I was like, oh my Lord, what have I got myself into? And the guy that got hired on the same day as me showed up at the first staff meeting with a black eye, a fat lip, and a scar across his face. from being attacked by a client. So I became very interested in modeling the structure of how people got angry very quickly so that I could find a way to diffuse it and prevent people from getting hurt, including myself, the clients and me. Okay. So you can use it to model problems so that you can undo the problems, and you can use it to model excellence so that you can repeat the excellence. One of my first modeling projects with excellence was when I graduated from NLP Institute of California with my master practitioner back in 98. I said, I'm going to be my first client. So I've got to set a huge goal that seems totally impossible, feels impossible, and then do it. And that would be good proof that these coaching skills work. So a buddy of mine, who's kind of a smart aleck at the time, said, why don't you double your income in a year? And that made my stomach nauseous. I thought I was going to vomit when he said it, because the idea of doubling my income as a case manager, making about maybe 30 grand a year at the time, seemed impossible. But what I did was I did exactly that. I doubled my income in 10 months doing something I'd never done before, and I used NLP to do it. I became a software engineer. That was something I knew that if I learned how to do it quickly using NLP, I could actually go and talk my way into a job. And 10 months later to the day, I got hired at exactly double my income because I wouldn't take a penny less. And I used NLP to do it. I modeled 3 software engineers who were buddies of mine who let me ask them stupid questions, at least it seemed at the time. And I was able to teach myself. And this is something every single one of you can do. And so one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do during the course of the program is think about some juicy, audacious goal that you may have for yourself that seems right now like no way, feels impossible, like winning $1 billion in the lottery or something. Take something like that, set that as a goal for yourself, and let's see how you feel about it by the end of the 15 weeks, because it's definitely possible if you start to open up your mind, which is what we're going to be doing. The way that NLP ultimately helps you in your life, I believe, just to summarize, is it will help you make clear, compelling, measurable, and attainable goals that are truly worthwhile and that are very likely to work out long-term instead of eventually cause you to feel dissatisfied or dismayed or sabotage. It's also a multi-level approach to change. So many of our friends and loved ones love to give us advice about what to do differently. Okay. But in the world of NLP, if you don't believe something's possible for you, it doesn't matter how many resources you have available, you simply will not use them. So there are different levels that change has to occur on. There's the environment, there are behaviors, there are skills and capabilities, there are beliefs and values, there is identity, and then there's even a field beyond that. And when you are aware of these different levels, you know where to begin to get real results with the client. So if someone doesn't believe they're a math person, no matter how many videos you send them about how to break down math equations and do them, they've got that block there. They'll never get it. I can't tell you how many coaches I've worked with over the years who have that same issue going on with marketing or sales. They can't get themselves to learn it because the beliefs are not in place to support that learning happening. So it's like having a computer with no internet and trying to send an email. Good luck, not going to happen. So this is a multi-level approach to change, which is what's necessary to get real change with people. Using NLP can also have the ability to predict roadblocks ahead of time and find workarounds before they happen. You'll be able to see things coming. This is where you get this essence of being a bit of a mind reader, if you will. You'll also be able to notice patterns that affect behavior and change them, which is important. And then you'll have tools, like I mentioned before, for traumas, imprints, and stuff that gets them stuck.